Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 53 based on novel. So let's start. With the addition of a few drops of semi-imperial strong man's blood essence, the black flames in the medicine tripod rose under those drops of blood essence. With the extreme consumption of Mo Zhai's soul power, the situation in the medicine tripod was completely stabilized. At the moment, Mo Zhai is already weak. His dark old face is as white as paper. There is no blood under his skin and bone face. A pair of red old eyes are about to jump out of his eyes, which makes people feel extremely terrible at a glance. Looking at the referee's bench at the moment, Ji Li looked at the two people in the field below with a dignified face, and his heart was very sad. Red Phosphorus, sitting beside Ji Li, also looked at Mo Zhai with a frown, and noticed that the medicine in the medicine tripod was more powerful and solid. Red Phosphorus was also a little nervous. After all, before the pill in Xiao Yangding was successfully condensed into a young pill, the situation in the game would fall towards Mo Zhai. The attraction of Imperial Pill is really terrible. Now, Mo Zhai's Imperial Pill has just become a real Imperial Pill. As long as Mo Zhai can forcibly support this level, the Imperial Baby Pill in front of him will also become a real Imperial Pill. But looking at Xiao Yang, although the situation in front of him at the moment seems to be stable, there is still a big crisis under this stability. Next, in Xiao Yang's pill melting process, he needs to completely suppress the energy in those ointments, and then gradually integrate the ointments. This process not only needs strong soul power and abundant fighting spirit, but also takes a longer time. For Xiao Yang, the test of existence is not 1 or 2 points. It will be the ointment after the fusion of hundreds of medicinal materials. The process of reintegration will be more difficult. If you can succeed, the young pill will reappear, and the outcome will be hard to tell. If you fail, the young pill will be destroyed, and Mo Zhai will win, and his herbalist guild will give up. This game is really a big bet. At the moment, Xiao Yang's situation is similar to Ji Li's judgment. The pills in the medicine tripod are still merging at an extremely slow speed, and in this process, he must suppress all kinds of energy in the pills at a balance point. As for the length of suppression, it depends entirely on the speed of pill fusion. I have to say, this process is really long. The senses of all parts of the body have been opened to the peak state for a long time, which makes Xiao Yang's consumption in all aspects of the body reach an extremely terrible level while continuously refining medicine. In general, Xiao Yang's consumption at the moment is more terrible than that of the previous Mo Zhai. At this moment, even the young man and Shen Laowa on the stand are not very stable in their hearts. The young man saw all the changes in Xiao Yang's body, and then looked at the pill in Xiao Yangding, but there was no direct proportion between the two. For Xiao Yang, who has never refined the Imperial Pill, in order to successfully condense the Imperial Pill, he really tried his best, but I don't know how it will end. Young Lord, in your opinion, what will be the outcome of this competition? Shenlaro Micro squinted at Xiao Yang, glanced at the medicine tripod in front of Mo Zhai, took a deep breath and preached to the young man on the side. The young man couldn't help frowning when he heard the speech. To tell the truth, he was not a medicine refiner. He didn't have much insight into medicine refining. He didn't know much about the situation in the field at the moment, but it was difficult to make a conclusion from Xiao Yang's situation at the moment. After a long time, the young man frowned slightly and took back the jade fan in his hand. The glittering white jade fan hissed in his palm. Then the young man shook his head and said lightly at the corner of his mouth, "Alas, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Mo Zhai has been famous for a long time. He is also an old man's object. At present, the Imperial Pill in his tripod is bound to succeed. As for Yang Xiao, although he is a new second-class herbalist, his strength is extremely extraordinary, and his soul strength is no less than that of Mo Zhai. They fight together, but we can't make a conclusion. It's not the end, it's superfluous to say anything." Hearing this, Shenlaro raised his eyebrows and smiled. He turned to the young man and said with a smile, "Hehe, I haven't heard that the young lord has appreciated a peer for a long time. With your heart, there are few peers on the mainland that you can admire." When the man smiled, he looked at Xiao Yang below and smiled again. "Alas Tilda, sometimes, some people are not satisfied. Yang Xiao, it seems that he has many secret. From the different fire he bears, how does Shenlaro think he got it? This? Oh, come on, let's watch it. Wait quietly. The answer will always be revealed. Maybe he will tell us himself without us going to explore." When the young man spoke, he stopped talking, but continued to look down at Xiao Yang in the square field. After nodding slightly, Shenlao also turned his eyes. The man said well. In the end, no matter how much they said, it was useless. It's better to watch it calmly. After all, the Emperor's baby pill has appeared. Now it's not far from the end. Invisibly, in the noise of thousands of people talking, time passed again. In the twinkling of an eye, the medicine refining master's meeting had been over for a month, and Xiao Yang had been out of the Shenling family for a month. In a month, Xiao Yang and the elixir in Mozhai's tripod were all turned into Emperor's baby elixir by coincidence, which is very good news for Xiao Yang. After all, as long as there is the first time, there will be the second time, which shows that he has the ability to refine Emperor's elixir. In those days, for a young imperial pill, the most powerful people on the whole fighting continent could be crazy about it. Now, in the twinkling of an eye, Xiao Yang, who incarnated as a semi-imperial powerful person, has been able to refine imperial pills. This is really a change of events. The appearance of the two imperial product baby pills seems to have attracted the attention of the whole audience. At this moment, all people are staring at the medicine tripod in front of Xiao Yang, hoping to see the moment when the imperial product pill becomes. The influence of imperial pill is not big. When time flows quietly in front of people again, at a certain moment, a hurricane suddenly blows up between heaven and earth, and the sky suddenly becomes gloomy. The sky gradually changed. On the void square, the atmosphere gradually became crazy. At this moment, all the people stared at the medicine tripod in front of Mozhai with wide eyes. In the tripod, a pill the size of a cyan longan was spinning in the dark flame. Up to now, this imperial product young pill is finally going to turn into a real imperial product pill. The medicine power of the pill is rapidly coagulating. The original uneven surface of the pill is also gradually becoming smooth under the refining of the flame. When the medicine power is completely coagulated, it will be the time when the imperial pill Shumi pill is completed. However, at the moment, the sky between heaven and earth quickly became dark, and the crowd surged in the sky, leaving a vast space for the sky above them. Above the sky, the thunder clouds rolled, and the dark thunder clouds were as deep as the endless void. The bursts of thunder roaring from them also made many people in the field turn pale. Such a terrible Dan Lei, I'm afraid it can kill a saint fighting strong man with one blow. However, at the moment, Mozhai, who was at the end of his power, saw such changes in the sky, but his pale face showed a winning smile. Dan Lei. Rock Owl, you will lose. The thunderous thunder resounded through the sky, like the roar of thunder beasts. There were dense thunder clouds above the sky. The rolling thunder clouds seemed to be alive at the moment, enveloping the whole wild ancient city. They were so powerful that everyone felt a shudder from the soul at the moment. This kind of power is really heaven's power, vowing to kill all people. At this moment, Jiu Li and Red Phosphorus can't help standing up and looking at the scene above the sky with dignity. Shua. With the sound of two breaking rumors, people's eyes immediately shifted over the square. Under the thunder cloud, Yang Bing and Hu Leoge stood side by side, looking up at the thunder cloud over the whole wild ancient city. At this moment, even with their strength, they couldn't help feeling a dignified palm under their sleeves and robes. It was also held up with a bit of fear in his eyes. From the thunder clouds, they can clearly feel a pressing force, which has nothing to do with them. It is all directed at the imperial pill in Mozhai Ding, but now, because of Mozhai, they stand in front of this Tianwei side by side. Among them, Yang Bingmian is the only one who shows a dull color. He has seen a lot of Dan Lei and has helped people block it. After many years, he sees Dan Lei again. Even though he is still afraid, he is much better than Hu Leoge. Haha, Dan Lei. I think I was more powerful than that time. The second-class herbalist also hired 5.5 emperors. At that time, my strength was only 5.5 emperors. When Dan Lei dispersed, I was also seriously injured. I just don't know how powerful it will be to see Dan Lei again with my 8.5 emperors later peak strength. Ha 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 ha. Seemingly bland, Yang Bing also stared at the thunder cloud above his head with a cold smile. Under his sleeve robe, his skinny left palm slowly stroked his right hand. In the position of his right thumb, it was horribly empty. There was only a group of dry skin and meat together, which was like a flesh pimple and quite penetrating. This injury was left by Dan Lei last time. In retrospect, although Yang Bing's temperament is indifferent, his heart still trembles slightly. That kind of pain is something he can't forget all his life. Every time he sees dark clouds all over the sky, he can't help thinking of that terrible experience. But that's why he hates Tianwei. If he has enough strength, he doesn't mind fighting Dan Lei. Now, seeing Dan Lei again, the hatred in his heart gradually turned into a cold and extremely cold sense of war, which surged in his heart for a long time. Aware of Yang Bing's breath, Hu Laoge immediately changed his complexion slightly. His eyebrows were slightly wrinkled, and his body shape was not allowed to move aside. The fighting spirit in the cyclone in his body was like a spring, always ready to deal with emergencies. Brother Hu. At that time, I will meet Dan Lei first. You can bully me as long as I call you. You and I will fight together. Hearing this, Hu Laoge couldn't help turning his eyes. He first nodded slightly, and then his eyes narrowed slowly. The light in the depths of his pupils flickered slightly. He was also an 8-star and a half emperor. Yang Bing was slightly senior by virtue of his generation. He really didn't treat him as a strong man of the same level. But then, old Hu's face changed again. He looked up and smiled, stepped back to one side and said with a smile, "Hehe, it seems that Elder Yang Bing wants to meet this Dan Lei for a while. Well, in that case, please ask Elder Yang Bing to go first. When I need you, I can go up again, hehe." Hearing Hu Laoge's words, Yang Bing turned his head and looked at him indifferently. Seeing the warm smile on his face, Yang Bing's face was more cold, but Yang Bing didn't say much. He just stared at it and took back his eyes. Binghan's eyes into the sword instantly shot at the thunder cloud above his head. At this time, in the square below and the medicine tripod in front of Mo Zhai, a column of light suddenly shot out of the sky. At the same time, terrible energy fluctuations swept away, and countless people were swept away by the energy storm, which also made the originally crowded empty square become empty in an instant. The light column was all over the sky and went straight into the thunder cloud. At the next moment, there was a sudden surge in the dark thunder cloud, and the rumbling thunder spread across the sky. Then, a dark lightning suddenly rushed out of the thunder cloud and bombarded the medicine tripod in front of Mo Zhai below. Hee, if you want to destroy the Emperor Pill, you'd better pass the pass first. When the dark Dan Lei fell, Yang Bing's cold laughter came out slowly. Then Yang Bing moved and stood under the Dan Lei in an instant. At the same time, his dry palms suddenly burst out and roared the oncoming terrorist Dan Lei. Dan Lei also seemed to know Yang Bing's intention. His dark body soared in an instant, and his falling speed was more rapid. The terrible force of thunder made the surrounding void burst. In the face of such power, Yang Bing's icy blue eyes mean even more. The fighting spirit in his body gushes out madly, condenses on his left palm, condenses into a thick layer of ice on the surface of his palm, and blasts towards the Dan Lei with the same terrible power. Ice palm. With a low cry, the ice-blue palm collided with the dark Dan Lei. At that time, it was like thunder between heaven and earth. An earth-shaking roar swept over the whole wild ancient city. Between heaven and earth, except for a few people, at this moment, even those semi-imperialist powers fell into the void as if they had been struck by lightning, landed in the city and looked up at the scene above the sky. As for Xiao Yang and Mo Zhai on the void square, Mo Zhai's DI Dan has become, but he is still maintaining the last pregnant Dan. Only after surviving the Dan Lei and waiting for the Lei robbery to disperse, at that time, the Shumi Dan in the medicine tripod in front of Mo Zhai can be regarded as a real refining success. As for Xiao Yang, although it is also in the final stage, the young Dan is not coagulated. Although there are signs of becoming a Dan, it is still a long way from Dan Cheng. Xiao Yang can only restrain his anxiety and stabilize his state of mind and continue to condense. As long as the young Dan has become, the Emperor Dan is not difficult. What's more, it's just a matter of time. He has survived for a month. Xiao Yang doesn't care about the rest of the time. After all, if he can't wait for this time, he's not Xiao Yang. However, the most concerned problem at the moment is that Mo Zhai Di Dan has become the champion of the Medicine Refining Teachers Congress. It seems that Xiao Yang is sure to lose the Medicine Refining Teachers Congress at any level, when the pill here is still refining, but the war has begun in the void over there. Between heaven and earth, terrible thunders continue to fall and bombard Yang Bing, but every lightning stroke is dissolved by Yang Bing in the most aggressive way. In the wild ancient city below, everyone looked up at the scene above the sky. It was unimaginable that the terrible thunder like a giant beast would be disintegrated again and again in the hands of a human with a body size of tens of thousands of times. The 8-star and half-emperor strong man was really terrible. With the power of one person, we can resist the power of heaven and earth. Such mighty power is rare in the world. Tut tut. Is this the 8-star and a half-emperor? It's terrible to be able to disintegrate such a terrible Dan Lei move. Hey, it's not only the 8-star and a half-emperor, but the elder Yang Bing of others, But the elder of Haiyun Palace is a real strong man who has reached the peak of the late 8-star-and-a-half emperor. I'm afraid his accomplishments are almost to the real level of fighting the emperor. Do di, tut tut, it's amazing. That kind of strong person, even in terms of the whole continent, can be the top strong person who can frighten one side. Alas, I just don't know. When will we be able to practice to the state of Master Yang Bing? Looking at the shocking scene above the sky, there were bursts of sighs from the crowd below. The 8-star-and-a-half emperor is indeed strong and has been separated from the category of ordinary strong people. It is no wonder that these people will sigh like this. However, compared with the situation seen by the people below, at this moment, Yang Bing in the sky has two completely different results. At the beginning, Yang Bing was really powerful and almost broke Dan Lei with one palm. As long as he blew out one palm, the oncoming Dan Lei, no matter how powerful and how terrible, would burst and disperse under Yang Bing's palm. I have to say that such spirit can really shake the world. However, with the gradual extension of time, the thunder cloud above Yang Bing's head seems to have no intention to disperse. On the contrary, its power becomes more and more powerful. The power of each attack on Dan Lei is doubled. Although Yang Bing can still break the enemy with one force by virtue of his fighting skills, he can't resist after a long time. Boom. 3 palms in a row, Yang Bing finally broke the Dan Lei in front of him, but at the moment, his upper body was numb. The power of thunder was flowing rapidly between the meridians in his body, making him exhausted. The tingling feeling like a needle can no longer be forcibly suppressed. At this time, Yang Bing feels extremely laborious even moving his fingers. His 2 arms are no longer effective, as if they don't belong to him. Hiss. On Yang Bing's originally indifferent face, a deeper dignified color has emerged at the moment. There are also some waves in a pair of ice-blue eyes. The power of thunder has made him unable to take his time as before. Thorn la la. A burst of thunder came out. Yang Bing twisted his neck and looked up. The thunder cloud rolled up again. Looking at the posture, it was like boiling water. A crack opened in the thunder cloud, and then the world was surprised. A more terrible Dan Lei fell down and hit Yang Bing below. Seeing this scene, Yang Bing's mouth could not help convulsing violently for a while. He hurriedly controlled his almost unconscious arm. He was furious in the palm and tried his best to get rid of the numbness from the body. At the same time, he clenched his palm and greeted the thunder with a fist. Boom. With a roar, the thunder did not disperse. On the contrary, Yang Bing flew backward and fell quickly towards the void square below. Looking at the thunder, although it was weakened, its prestige was not reduced at all. After a slight meal, it fell down again, chased Yang Bing and hit the latter in the chest. Yang Bing saw this. Even though he was indifferent, he immediately threw his indifference for his own life. He quickly turned to the old Hu monster on the void and shouted, "Old monster Hu, move quickly, help me stop this Dan Lei." On the contrary, Hu Laoge smiled coldly at the corners of his mouth. He neither started nor spoke. He looked at Yang Bing with a sneer. He raised a mocking smile at the corners of his mouth and stood in vain. He didn't see his help at all. Yang Bing was shocked when he saw that old monster who ignored him. He knew that no one could help him at the moment, so he had to rely on himself to resist Dan Lei. I'm not scared. I'm afraid you won't succeed with a Dan Lei." With a violent drink in his heart, Yang Bing's face regained his previous cold and indifferent look. His heart was also stabilized for a while. His mind moved, and his fighting spirit burst out in an instant, forming a solid cold armor on the body surface. After doing this, Yang Bing was still a little worried. He simply poured out all the fighting spirit in his body until he completely frozen the void in front of him, which was hit by the thunder. Boom. As soon as there was a roar, the sky and the earth were shrouded in thick clouds. Dan Lei dissolved and the armor dispersed. Yang Bing continued to fly upside down. Then he fell on the stone platform beside Mo Zhai uncontrollably, which scared Mo Zhai almost to jump up. If Yang Bing smashed the traditional Chinese medicine tripod, he really wanted to strangle Yang Bing alive. Hu Laoge, you sincerely want to die. A moment later, Yang Bing finally got up in a panic and forcibly removed the power of thunder in his body. Then he turned and shouted at the old Hu monster who was still standing in the void. If this was the beginning, old monster who was really afraid of Yang Bing, but at this moment, he was reckless. He wanted the cheap, but in the end he suffered a loss, but he didn't do old monster who. However, old monster who is an old monster after all. It's good to be clear in their hearts. It's useless to say more. We have to say it in the face of it. Hehe, I just watched Brother Yang Bing's development. I didn't respond to his words. I was stunned because I thought he was joking. Don't blame me. Next time, I will do it in time to keep him in the midst of fire and water. Yang Bing's eyes narrowed when he heard the voice of Old Monster Hu. After all, he was an old man. His mind was no worse than that of Old Monster Hu. He immediately nodded with a smile, but suddenly he snorted coldly and shouted, Do you think there will be another time? Hearing the speech, Hu Laoge also smiled twice and didn't answer. Instead, he looked up at the sky, which was still full of thunderclouds. No matter how much trouble they make, they still want to help Mo Zhai in the end. At present, they suppress their anger, calm down their unhappiness, and focus on this Dan Lei together. That's the business. You two, I hope we can work together. We're not here to fight. We'd better win the championship first. At that time, our compensation will not fall, otherwise once we're taken away by the boy. At this point, the voice in Yang Bing's ears was gradually cut off. At the thought of the benefits afterwards, even with Yang Bing's indifference, he couldn't help feeling a little excited. Imperial Pill is a rare treasure for all semi-imperial strong people, even if he is an 8-star and half-emperor. As for Hu Laoge, needless to say, his strength is not as good as Yang Bing, and he is looking forward to the Imperial Pill. Now when he hears Mo Zhai's words, he suddenly feels burning in his heart. Yang Bing looked at each other at the bottom. They couldn't see each other much. If it wasn't for the interests, the two would certainly not stand on one side. The semi-imperialist and strong have their own thoughts, especially those who are alone all the year round. They don't know the ghost in their hearts. At the moment, they can stand side by side. Maybe when they will suddenly turn against each other, they only have strength and interests in their eyes. As for reputation, although they won't let go, they have long been outside their lives. As soon as he shook his body, he removed all the thunder power in his body. Yang Bing flew into the void again and stood hundreds of miles away from the old monster Hu. This is the most balanced solution. At the moment, Dan Lei is no longer what they have to worry about. After all, with the consumption of Yang Bing, Dan Lei has reached the final stage. As long as he can resist this moment, Di Dan can be released immediately. Thorn la la. With the sound of thunder, a dark giant late in time crashed down towards the two people below. Even with Jiu Li's strength, he was afraid. This Dan Lei is really strong wave by wave. If it continues like this, the end will not be that no matter how powerful people will be chopped to death. Seeing this, Yang Bing looked more indifferent in front of him. He quickly stepped back and handed over the battlefield in front of Hu Laoge. Hu Laoge frowned when he saw Yang Bing retreat, but Dan Lei had fallen to the top of his head, but he had no other choice but to fight. With a cold hum, the old Hu monster waved his big sleeve, and the wide sleeve robe was wrapped around his arm. The palm grasped some corners of the sleeve robe, and the fighting spirit in his body was pouring out at the same time. The green brilliance was flashing around the old Hu monster, and then with a big hand, the sleeve robe wrapped around his arm suddenly bombarded out, and the original soft sleeve robe, at the moment of detonation, it was a bit more solid than steel. When the Dan Lei fell, it was forcibly dispersed. Wow dash! Hu Laoge's hand was released, and everyone in the wild ancient city was shocked. This hand is more shocking than Yang Bing's previous palm smashing Dan Lei. Just with his sleeve robe, he shook the Dan Thunder away with a blow. This kind of power is really unprecedented. Hearing the cheers from all over the city, the corners of whose mouth couldn't help but arouse a proud smile. Yang Bing's heart was even colder. He didn't expect that the Who's old monster was so popular with the help of his previous actions, which really made him feel uncomfortable. However, without waiting for the two people to act again, the thunder clouds rolled up again in the sky, and the terrible thunder also hit down again. Once his eyes turned, he looked at Xiao Yang again. At this time, Xiao Yang, like an old monk, turned a deaf ear to everything in the outside world. At this moment, the stone platform where he is located seems to be isolated from the world outside the stone platform. No matter what the outside wind and rain sounds, Xiao Yang is out of sight and out of hearing. He devotes himself to the calm in front of him. Although the fighting spirit in his body has reached the point where the oil is exhausted and the lamp is dry, although the soul power has long been insufficient and almost exhausted, Xiao Yang is still struggling to support. He is waiting. He is waiting for the moment when Emperor Dan was born. Xiao Yang firmly believes that the present imperial robbery pill is not far from the real imperial pill. At least, it is almost the same. As long as he can persevere, the imperial pill will be born successfully. At the moment, Xiao Yang looks like a dead man from the outside. Before he wants to be customized, his eyes are slightly closed, his face is grey as death, there is no ruddy blood under the skin, his whole body is motionless, and the breath between his nose is extremely weak. If he doesn't carefully explore, it's hard to imagine that he will be a living person. In the medicine tripod, the original raging fire is more than dozens of times weaker. If it is not for the terror of different fire itself, even ordinary flame, it cannot support the final pill condensation step, and the result at that time is that it falls short of success. At this moment, on the referee's bench, Jiu Li and Red Phosphorus are also staring at Xiao Yang with tight eyebrows. They dare not relax at all, for fear that Xiao Yang will suddenly be unable to support at any moment. On the stand, Shen Laro also looked nervously at the weak Xiao Yang below. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that Xiao Yang was trying his best to drain the last breath in his body for the combustion of different fire. If this pill still could not be condensed into Emperor pill, I'm afraid it would be dangerous. At this moment, even the young man with a dull face on the side of old Shen is also dignified. He knows that Xiao Yang has fought hard enough for this pill, but he doesn't think he has fought to this situation. It's really unimaginable. Alas, I admit, you are really strong and excellent. You are one of the few guys I have seen who can work so hard. You are really crazy. Above the void, the terrible Dan Lei is still struggling and raging, and the residual power of terror is still falling, as if he will never stop until he destroys the Emperor Dan. Boom. In the void, Yang Bing and Hu Leoge worked together to forcibly resist Dan Lei. Unexpectedly, they can't get any benefit by jointly resisting Dan Lei with their strength. Dan Lei is really terrible. Holding a slightly numb palm, Yang Bing looked up at the 10,000 feet of thunder clouds above the sky. At the moment, the thunder clouds were finally shrinking under the two of them. As long as Dan Lei dispersed, Emperor Dan would be able to come out. Boom. Looking at the thunder cloud rolling up again, Yang Bing and Hu Leoge looked at each other and smiled. Then the fighting spirit surged up in the body. They changed their palms and were ready to resist the next blow. Ha ha, I'm finally going to take the last blow. Ha ha, come on, let me see what's terrible about the Dan Lei led by the Imperial Pill. In the process of changing the formula in his hand, the old Hu monster gave a cold drink in his mouth, and his fighting spirit poured out wildly. He condensed rapidly in his palm, stared at the terrible Dan Lei falling rapidly, opened his palm and blew out with a fist. Boom. An earth-shaking violent roar, above the void, like Optimus Prime's terrorist Dan Lei, was blocked in the void by the joint attack of Yang Bing and Hu Leoge at the moment of its falling. The terrible Dan Lei suddenly stopped in the vast sky. This scene shocked countless people in the square city. They fought against the power of heaven and earth with their flesh and blood. These heroic feats are really brilliant in the war, but Dan Lei was blocked, and Yang Bing was also very uncomfortable. After supporting several breaths, they were finally forcibly blasted out by Dan Lei. The thunder was furious. Yang Bing and Hu Leoge immediately withdrew from thousands of feet away. They suppressed the power of the thunder rising again in their bodies. Their palms changed together. In the twinkling of an eye, two sets of fighting skills were displayed and blasted towards the Dan Lei. The Dan Lei was not weak at all. When the thunderclouds rolled, the dragon-like Dan Lei smashed down and tried to defeat the two men's bombardment. Unfortunately, Dan Lei was not weak, but the two men were also fighting skills. After several times, the thunderclouds in the sky became smaller and smaller until the two men rushed into the thunderclouds together. The terrible Dan Lei, finally, it slowly dispersed under the attention of everyone. When Dan Lei dispersed, the depressing atmosphere that enveloped the whole wild ancient city was swept away. The bright sunshine made everyone feel comfortable. On the stone platform, Mo Zhai finally put down his burden in his heart. As soon as he loosened his body, he sat down in front of the medicine tripod, and the sumaton in the bloodbat tripod. Finally, the refining is completed. Wow dash! When the imperial elixir was refined, there were voices everywhere in the city below. Today, they not only saw the long-awaited success of the refining of imperial elixir, but also saw two rare 8-star and half-emperor level terrorist strongmen fighting together. Today's thing is really hard for ordinary people to see in their whole life. Cough. Hu Leoge stood in the void, looked down at the countless practitioners in Xiafang City, listened to the cheers in their mouth, and felt a burst of comfort, fame and wealth, which can always make people easily put down some things in their hearts. Yang Bing swept through the void indifferently. His cold eyes paused on Xiao Yang. The killing intention in his eyes was obvious. Then he looked at the old monster who opposite. Although the two were reluctant to cooperate this time, the process was not pleasant. During this period, They didn't give each other less pits. I'm afraid they would really hurt their muscles and bones if they weren't powerful. Now it's finally time for Dan Lei to disperse and the Imperial Pill has been successfully refined. Next, it's up to Jiyu Li to say. It's reasonable that now the Imperial Pill of Mozhai has been successfully refined by Xiao Yang first. Anyway, it should be Mozhai's victory. The champion of the Medicine Refining Teachers University should also belong to Mozhai. But Jiyu Li was more and more dignified at the moment. Looking at the pill in the medicine tripod in front of Mozhai, he could be sure that it was indeed an Imperial Pill. But look at Xiao Yang at the moment. Although the pill seemed to be the time to become a pill, it was still in the pregnant pill. It had not been baked for a long time, and until now, nor did it trigger Dan Lei. Based on this alone, we can basically judge that this pill will have an accident 9 times out of 10. It's a pill that can't be sure of success, but no one will agree with it. Therefore, from now on, Mozhai will become the champion of the Medicine Refining Teachers University. After this, Jiyu Li not only wants to give the volume of Imperial product Dan Fang to Mozhai, but also wants to give the whole Medicine Refining Guild in the Wild Ancient City to others soon. At the thought of this, Jiyu Li's heart is also complaining. Is it difficult? The Medicine Refining Guild, which was operated by predecessors, is going to be defeated by him now? Thinking like this, Jiyu Li felt more and more bitter in his heart. The palm under his sleeve robe trembled slightly, which was Jiyu Li's surging mood at the moment. How could he be stable in his mood with such results in front of him? He didn't feel a deep sense of guilt when he thought of giving the Herbalist Guild away. Red Phosphorus on one side sighed helplessly when he saw this. His palm rested on Jiyu Li's shoulder and gently comforted Jiyu Li's heart, but as far as Red Phosphorus is concerned, his heart is also difficult to understand. Red Phosphorus is also very sad. After all, the Herbalist Guild was supported by him and Jiyu Li up to now. He wants to give away his years of hard work to others. How can he not stand the waves in his heart? Alas! It seems that the Herbalist Guild has lost. After all, Yang Xiao is still too young. He is a newly advanced second-order herbalist. This outcome is expected. On the stand, Shen Laro looked at Jiyu Li from a distance. He couldn't help shaking his head and uttered a slightly sad low sigh. However, at this moment, it was the young man beside him who ignored Shen Laro's words, but stared at Xiao Yang below with his eyes shining. A moment later, the young man's eyes narrowed slightly, and the jade fan in his hand patted hard in his palm. The slap also surprised Shen Laro on one side. When he looked at the young man, the latter also opened his mouth and said, "Shen Laro, look at the medicine tripod of Rock Owl. There seems to be something unusual in it." Huh! Listening to his voice, Shen Laro also raised his eyebrows. He was puzzled by the young man's sudden words. When he looked into his eyes, he frowned again and didn't know what to do. The fire in Xiao Yang's medicine tripod was rising, and a dripping round pill was constantly refining in it. The bubbling pill fragrance was like a spring, although the scene was strange, but it's no different. This. Shen Laro shook his head again. He still didn't quite understand the young man's words in his heart, and the young man opened his mouth again and asked a word that seemed irrelevant to Shen Lao. "Shen Lao, what do you think of Mo Zhai's finished Imperial Pill?" At the voice exit, Shen Lao also turned his eyes, looked at the pill that Mo Zhai was still in the tripod, nodded and said, "Judging from the fineness and the richness of Dan fragrance, there is no doubt that Cheng Dan has a good quality in the Imperial Pill." At the moment when the words came out, Shen Lao seemed to wake up. His eyes suddenly coagulated slightly, and then suddenly looked at the medicine tripod in front of Xiao Yang. His eyes were full of shock. His eyes were also staring at the round pill in the beast tripod. Is it said that he is refining? Well, it looks like it can't be wrong. Who? We all ignored too much, and they forgot too much. The Imperial Pill is more than refining. Tut tut. This Rock Owl is really terrible. Now, there's another good play. Boom. Xuanlao's voice just fell. Suddenly, there was a thundering sound between heaven and earth, which shocked everyone in the wild ancient city in an instant. After an instant, everyone responded quickly. The sound was like Dan Lei again. At this moment, the sky and the earth, the wild ancient city, everyone locked their eyes on the black-robed youth on the void square. At this moment, Xiao Yang is the only one who can trigger Dan Lei in the whole wild ancient city. This video will end here.